For this project, we have an antique secretary desk. Right now, you're looking at a close-up of the inside, and you can see right off the bat, the backboard is not original. That means it's been replaced. We're going to modernize this. The piece is really in really rough shape, and so we're just going to transition it into more of a coffee bar. The wood needs to be freshened up. I'm going to take the insert out, which I've done in this picture, and again, you can see that backboard. It's just a sheet of plywood. We're going to take that out in just a minute. The top was loose. It needed to be glued and repaired. So I'm going to walk you through a lot of those steps here in this video, and then also show you how I finished it with chalk mineral paint. The hinges, there should be two on both sides that really guide the wood out, so when the top drops, it is assisted. I only had one and it was broken. Here you can see two pieces of the feet that were left, and I glued those back on. For this particular view, I removed the back. I took the front drop down lid off. I'm actually not going to be using it because it was just not in good shape. I've never had this before, but the hardware was actually permanently in there. I could not unscrew them to remove them, and that's probably because they just didn't want them to come off. This is the back of the hinge. I slid through the back once the backer board was off and was able to unscrew that broken hinge off. For some reason on the left and right towards the front there is damage. I just, instead of trying to cramp that back into place, I'm just going to patch that. Again, this is really rough shape, so I'm not trying to restore this back to original condition. So this is the left side. I'll also get some wood filler. I'll sand that down and also give it a nice smooth repaired look. Let that dry, and then take some sanding paper or a sander and smooth that down to a nice great condition. There's loose nails that'll need to be pounded back in and filled in if you'd like. It's time for a good clean with Dixie Belle's white lightning, and I'll do that on the entire project. Where there's details, you might need a toothbrush or some kind of little scrubbing device that gets you into the cracks and crevices. Here I'm repairing that top, putting wood glue into both sides, and then probably good 48-inch clamps. Brought that all together with some good pressure and let that dry overnight. Next, I'm going to give the top and also the desk area a light sanding just to smooth out any rough scratches that have happened over time. Then after that, I'm going to go ahead and jump onto the backer board. I'm going to first boss it with gray B.O.S., which is not shown here. And then I'm going to come in with Dixie Belle Chalk Mineral Paint and give it a solid 2 coats of Antebellum Blue. Back to the cabinet desk itself, I went ahead and applied gray B.O.S. to the entire project. And then once that was done, on the inside of the desk, I'm going to use sandbar and probably put at least 2 coats. For the outside of the secretary desk, I used Dixie Belle's Gravel Road, 2 good coats of that, and in a little bit we'll add some shading. It's just a nice complement worn gray tone that'll go well with the sandbar. For the inside back panel, I used Dixie Belle's Greek Key stencil using Copper Bronze Glaze over that Antebellum Blue, and it really gave a nice shimmery texture for that back panel. Alright, for this part of the demonstration, I'm going to show you how I use a technique called shading. Basically what I'm using is Dixie Belle's Caviar, and I'm going into the crevices of the front panels, and I'm going to add a little bit of vignetting to some specific sections. One of the things you want to make sure you do is use a misting bottle to keep the surface wet. The original color of Gravel Road is dry, so only thing wet right now is the surface and the chalk mineral paint I'm applying. I'm using a French tip brush to feather it out so it's nice and soft around those areas. I'm going to be fading them out towards the middle of the piece. So keep a couple brushes, one brush to apply the paint and another brush to soften and blend it in. And again, I like to refer to this as shading whenever I'm doing this technique. I'm going around the hardware, just creating a little bit of almost the impression that area of the piece is dirtier than the rest, or if you want to call it, I'm accentuating the details and bringing out some of the angles of this piece. Whatever color you choose is up to you. You can do a lot of contrast, which I feel like I'm getting here with Caviar, or you can switch to a different color that has less contrast. You could even add some colors that add a little bit of pop, like I could do something like a teal color and go really interesting, kind of almost like a glow effect. You could do a lighter color than the gravel road. It just really depends on what the look you're going for. I would almost classify this one more in the category of moody, so that's why I'm going with a darker tone. So we'll repeat those steps down below. I've already misted the surface first, and just using a small craft brush, applying a little bit of touch of Caviar into the area. Again, this is up to you how much chalk paint you want to apply. You can use a 1-inch brush or a hairline brush, whatever works for you on applying how much you want. Just make sure the surface is wet, because the chalk paint will start to grip and dry pretty quick. And this is a wet technique, not a dry technique. So if it's wet enough, just jump into it or bring out the misting bottle and keep it wet. You should be fine as long as you've given the first coat of paint a good day or two to dry. You're not going to be lifting or messing up any of that first work you've done. It really is going to work out really well to work wet on wet. I did not top coat first. I get that question a lot, and that's fine. You're welcome to top coat. But I've always found that if I'm working in a small enough space and working quickly with the misting bottle, I don't need a top coat first. Larger surfaces, you may want to consider that. I'll apply that technique to the entire front drawer sections, but now I'm going to switch to the base of the feet. I thought it'd be good to put a little bit of that same shading at the top of each spiral leg. So mist first, apply your dark or light color. In this case, again, I'm using Caviar, and put it on all sides. Notice it's still wet, and I'm going to use the same French tip brush to soften it out. If you ever need to, you can always wipe some of this paint off if you feel like you have too much. It's still wet, so you're not really messing up anything by wiping it off. Sometimes you just might get too much. I have my piece on carts. I'm on a stool that has wheels, so it's nice to be able to move around different sides of this project. And I'll do this technique to all 4 feet or legs of the secretary desk. So for this section, I'm just going to do the area right above the skirt, I guess you might call it, of this piece. So a quick line of mist. You notice I'm a little sloppy with putting that on there, only because I know I'm about to feather and soften it out. Just kind of get that on there, make sure it's nice and wet. Could use a larger brush again if you want a higher blend. And then go back in, just back and forth, soften that, feather it, vignette it, and if you need to, use your rag to clean up any parts that you don't want on any part of the previously painted surface. I'm actually in this part here, I'm using an old oval small brush that over time has just gotten kind of feathered, and it works really well for blending. Because it's a larger surface, I thought that would help really well. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. Mist first, apply this streak or line of paint, however you want to describe that. It's a really quick process. You don't really have a choice because you are working wet. If you top coated first, you might have a little bit more time, but I think the water helps the paint move better and gives me the ability to blend, and you'll see me reaching for that misting bottle quite often. The French tip has a nice firm bristle to it, so you can really work that paint around and get it loosened up and softened up. But I am going to go back probably to the oval small and really soften that blend vignette out really well. It just finishes it off. The goal here is a nice, smooth, brushless looking finish. So it's going to be very subtle, but it's a little attention to detail that I enjoy doing here. Now I'm going to use Dixie Belle's Gilding Wax Copper, and I'm going to accentuate details of this project. Corners, edges, molding, the hardware, just things like that. Wherever you want to put that, you can use a brush. I do that sometimes depending on the detail type. For the most of this project, I'm just using the tip of my finger to apply that. And I'll do as many areas I feel looks like it should be hit with that metallics. Now, you can do this before or after your top coat. I'm doing it before I top coat. Just as my preference. You might also be able to do both. You can do it before your top coat and after. If you read the instructions on the gilding wax, it does talk about buffing that gilding wax. Well, you can't really buff it if you top coat it. So just keep in mind there's multiple ways that I use this product, and usually for me I top coat it into my piece. Probably because I'm just used to protecting everything with top coat. Here I'm putting the copper gilding wax on the corners just to give it a little bit more accent on those skirts around this project. I think it turned out really well. With the gravel road, the copper gilding wax, the stencil, I believe it all came together really well for a nice moody coffee bar, for a sophisticated space. Love to know what you think about it.